barrier of rocks and swirling waters, which made navigation on the Danube while entering Romania almost impossible for centuries. That is how the Iron Gates region was known ever since ancient times. Many navigators tried their mastery, wishing to cross this dangerous passage, where the Danube is storming the mountains. The Iron Gates Natural Park, of about 125,000 hectares, is situated in the southwest of Romania, with its southern limit the Danube, the Nera to the west, the watershed of the Danube tributaries to the north, and a winding line starting downstream Gura Voi up to Matoraț Peak. The main access points to the park are situated close to Drobeta Târnu Severin and Orșova in Mehedinți County and to Sokol and Naidaș in Karaș-Severin County. The mild climate with sub-Mediterranean influences, together with the geological structure, relief and hydrography, represented favorable conditions for the formation and conservation of different types of ecosystems of a great scientific value, as well as of some unique landscapes in Romania. In 1971, it was signed in Iran the Ramsar Convention for Wetlands, aiming at preserving these regions for waterbird habitats. Romania joined this convention in 1991, the Iron Gates Natural Park being one of the 8 Ramsar sites in Romania. The Iron Gates Natural Park belongs to the protected areas registered in the 5th category of the International Union for Preserving Nature, administered mainly for conserving the landscape and for recreation. The statue was acquired in 2000, becoming a region where the beauty of landscapes and the biological diversity can be capitalized while keeping traditions unchanged, human activities being carried out here in harmony with nature. Kalinovat Isle, with its shiny waters, swamps, sands and gravel, woody clusters of white wicker and poplar, with a specific fauna and flora for wetlands, ensures feeding, nesting and living conditions for more species of migratory, passing or sedentary birds. One of the best-known natural reservations at the national level is the Natural Reserve of the Danube Hollows, having an area of 250 hectares and being situated on the territory of Dubova. The Danube crosses here the narrowest and grandest part of the gorge, between the river mouth of the Plavișevița and Ogradena. The reserve has 2 distinct sides, the Great and the Small Hollows, parted by a semicircular gulf called the Dubova Basin. The Park Administration, the Scientific Council and the Research Unit permanently monitor the indicators for assessing the conservation state of the habitats in the park. The biodiversity of the park is exceptional, with 1,668 plant species and 5,200 animal species. These deep waters hide impressive fish specimens, which most fishermen can only dream of. Fish represents the greatest wealth of the Danube for the inhabitants of the region. Fishing is more than a tradition for them, it's a way of life. The absence of any kind of industry in the park, and since only crofting can be practiced there, fishing becomes a way of surviving for those people. The unchecked industrial fishing, but mainly poaching, especially using electricity or narrow nets, represents a constant threat to the water ecosystems and habitats. That is why industrial fishing is limited and angling is encouraged, as it offers, due to the impressive catches, satisfactions which only the real sport angler can feel. The monitoring actions are carried out all the year round, as nothing can replace the direct observation and watching of the habitats of the species here. The information obtained in the process are those which draw the attention over any disturbance in these very fragile ecosystems. Although the park administration tries to limit the anthropological impact over the area, there are situations when the supervised intervention over the environment is beneficial. In the summer months of June to August, a water tractor is used to reduce the chaotic development of the swamp chestnut, a plant which tends to cover the surface of the pools. The Danube Gorge is unique, with complex forms of karstic relief developed in limestone, with valleys, stints and caves, where the narrow river passes alternate with the bays formed where the tributaries flow into the Danube. The largest cave of the Danube Gorge is Ponikova. Situated near Dubova, Ponikova Cave is carved on the left bank of the Danube in the Great Hollows, being partially flooded after the creation of the dammed reservoir. It has a 100-meter-long hall with tumbled blocks on the floor, holes and concretions, and guano molds from the bats that form colonies in the cave. There are many beings in the cave adapted to the darkness, humidity, and low temperatures, among which the horseshoe bat. The bats are looking for inaccessible places for predators, away from draught. The invertebrate fauna develops mainly in the guano deposits. Fish, amphibians, and a series of invertebrates live in the lakes and rivers that cross the cave. Its galleries of 1,666 meters long cross Ciucaru Mare mountain, reaching the Danube. Ponikova Cave was declared a speleological reservation and represents a challenge for both scientists and tourists all the time. After building the Guravoi Dam and the formation of the dammed reservoir, the river mouths of all the Danube tributaries were flooded and changed into gulfs of different sizes. Consequently, the surface of the water increased, creating thus new habitats. In mild winters, if the Danube water doesn't freeze, flights of swans, summer geese, and small cormorant can be met here. This great variety is due to the geomorphology and position of this territory, protected from the northern cold winds and influenced by the southern mild climate, a fact which allowed many species characteristic to the South or West Asian regions to be able to migrate here. There have been identified 171 habitats in the area of the park, in which 26 are unique for Romania and 34 are habitats of community interest. A great number of waterbirds can be noticed on the dammed lake and all around it in winter and spring. Most of the species can be observed during their migration, some being winter guests, others sedentary. A characteristic of the site is represented by the large river mouths of the Danube tributaries and also small human communities, which creates conditions for sustaining the natural and quasi-natural ecosystems. A wetland can be considered of international importance if it can sustain important plant and animal populations for maintaining the biological biodiversity in a certain biogeographical region, if it usually ensures optimal conditions for over 2,000 waterbirds. The site has unique wetlands, rare and representative, including the Iron Gates Dammed Reservoir, together with the surrounding mountains, the Lochvey and Almaz Mountains. The international importance is also determined by the possibility for the wetland to commonly ensure conditions necessary for an important percentage of subspecies, species or families of native fish in different life cycles, to present an important food source in order to spawn, breed their young and migrate to or from the wetlands. Due to the weather, hydrographic and geomorphic conditions, which blend harmoniously with the floristic biodiversity, the Iron Gates National Park represents a real wildlife sanctuary, and the fauna here is an insufficiently studied treasure from a scientific point of view. In periods of drought, when the Danube water retreats, Tricule Fortress raises its towers, allowing us to see the long-gone greatness of the fortification. These are the ruins which, centuries ago, kept under control the traffic on the river. Today, a pair of red kestrels found shelter here, breeding their offsprings among the crenels where once the archers watched. It is a small falcon which feeds mainly with mice, insects, reptiles, and small birds. The region of the Hollows differs from the rest of the park through its floristic wealth and the large number of endemic species. There we meet the tulip of the Hollows, the Hollows bells, the wild vine and wild lilac. The tulip is a species of community interest, being found only in the area of the Hollows, on the steep slopes of the Big and Small Chukar Mountains. The southwest of the country has specific plant formations made up of wild lilac, manna ash, hornbeam, hawthorn, Banat maple, Turkish cherry trees, and other warm weather-loving species. The ash and poplar formations are often met here. The park shelters a number of 34 habitats of community interest, offering ecological conditions for 210 bird species out of the 500 known at national level. Almost half of them are found here as sedentary, nesting, or passing species. West of Belobruska, for 11 kilometers on the Danube, there are some quaternary loessile deposits, forming some real steep slopes, some being declared natural reserves, such as the Ravine of Martens, an ideal place for marten nesting. The shore marten is a migratory species, living in colonies, eating a lot of insects which it hunts with the open beak above the surface of the water at 50 kilometers per hour. There can be watched from Suska Bird Observatory large stretches of water with impressive expanses of reed and cane, which ensure good conditions for breeding, nesting and feeding for many species of birds. In this land paradise, you can sometimes meet the bat snake, a reptile that doesn't seem to enjoy appearing in a documentary. The Banat peony is an extremely rare plant, being preserved in the Baziash Natural Reserve at the eastern limit of our country. The populations are scarce, the plant being endangered by the loss of habitat and also by illegal picking for ornamentation. The Banat peony and the Iron Gates National Park is on the red list of the park and in the Red Book of Vascular Plants in Romania. Visible in all its splendor from the road between Porzejena and Sokol, Kalinovat Isle is lined with channels and lakes, which makes it an ideal habitat for the creatures here every spring. The small Venice in the middle of Danube offers, due to the maze of channels, unforgettable images to the tourists venturing here. Situated south of Sokol, Nera Pool of about 10 hectares looks like a bay created by the embranchment of the river Nera flowing into the Danube. This special bird protection area, ROSPA 0026, the Danube Course, Baziash Iron Gates, is formed of more wetlands, among which Nera Pool stands out clearly due to the diversity and great number of species are met here. The Iron Gates National Park is easily accessible, which represents a danger for its biodiversity, because some wild flora and fauna species can be taken unauthorized, being necessary a monitoring system of the state of some populations, mainly the endemic species, those of community interest, and the rare or endangered ones. The Iron Gates National Park Administration, together with the agencies for environment protection, the population, the firms, and the local councils, promote measures to reduce and eliminate the dangers for the plant and animal species of the park. Another negative phenomenon influencing directly the natural and landscape diversity is the chaotic development of the tourist infrastructure and the uncontrolled tourism. Building summer houses directly on the Danube bank represents a threat to biodiversity, both through the aggression against the ecosystems on the bank and against the river ones, due to the spilling sewage directly into the Danube. The tendency of building summer houses on the Danube bank intensified lately, many of them having no architectural style or aesthetic taste, which gradually leads to the loss of landscape values in the region of the park. The water turtle is endangered with extinction due to the decrease in natural conditions, to pollution, to the hydrological improvements, and even to some people's cruelty, being protected by law in all the European countries where it lives. An ample investment and conservation project is developed in the Iron Gates National Park at present. It aims at changing the mentality and perception of the local communities toward the values of this region through ecological education, information, awareness, and consultation. The emphasis is equally laid on changing the attitude and behavior of the tourists for preserving the park patrimony and for its lasting development. A decrease of the level of threats for the plant species of the park represents an essential condition for avoiding the decline of species. For this purpose, the park administration, together with the local councils, delineate the grazing areas for domestic animals, establishing the restraint perimeters. At the same time, together with the forest departments, there are established the maximum shares of picking medicinal herbs, species used in alimentation or decoration. The agencies of environment protection permanently assess the impact of the economic activities over the plant species. Moreover, there are established the areas with viable populations and the favorite habitats for different species in order to be recommended as integral protection areas or places of bird special protection. Dyfed Podziemna wetland is situated between Podziemna and the frontier picket located upstream Dyfed. It is one of the few wetlands on the Danube in Kara-Severin and Mehedinsk counties where such a great number of birds live on a relatively small area. Getting dark never implies the end of the wildlife show in the Iron Gates National Park. The small cormorant is a protected species at international level, whose population is attentively monitored, representing the objective of a project of the park administration regarding the improvement of the conservation state of priority birds. The strong winds blowing almost all the time over the western end of the park opened the new opportunities for capitalizing the wind power. From a geological point of view, there are habitats situated on crystalline and sedimentary fields, but also on fossil deposits. Mining the mineral resources has grown in the last 17 years, representing a great threat for the biodiversity of the park. The quarries close to the national roads 57 and 57A represent a danger by triggering erosion processes which have already affected their natural habitats and the region landscapes. These areas are important both for the large number of bird species in seasonal migrations and for nesting, as it is the case of the small cormorant, gull, small egret, and other strictly protected species. The little egret is protected by law in Romania, being a relatively rare bird. It prefers the swampy regions with clean and shallow waters where it can fish at will. The area is crossed by many populations of waterbirds, among which the red and the tufted duck. An important part in the program meant to preserve the park, which started in 2012, is represented by the mapping of the species and habitats. Among these, we must mention the cormorant, the dwarf heron, the little egret, the great egret, but also day and night raptor species. In the water maze, which begets the Danube Gate, we find Moldova Veche Isle, a stretch of land of about 1,627 hectares, a forgotten paradise, a swampy area which shelters an amazing diversity of plants and animals. The masters of this isle are the wild horses, nobody being able to tell when they arrived here. The dams and decanting ponds offer here excellent nesting conditions for the crested lark, grey linnet, and the skylark. The habitats of this isle shelter no less than 72 bird species belonging to 30 families of 14 orders. The administration of the park are now applying a basic plan to preserve and salvage this very little known treasure of Romania, as it really deserves. The aim of this plan is to maintain the species and habitats of community and national interest as best they can, to conserve the characteristic landscapes and specific geological, geomorphological, and paleontologic elements, it is of utmost importance for the mining of resources to continue without damaging the environment. For the same reason, a sustained battle is fought to diminish and eliminate the human activities with a negative